For my project, I decided to read 1001 Inventions by Mr. Shaloner himself. I decided to focus on the dawn of steam all the way to the modern era of railways, including some things that branched off in the middle. Before railways were ever conceived, the steam engine was slowly taking form. In 1765, James Watt looked at the idea of the extremely basic steam pump and turned it into a true engine. His design worked with a separate condenser, allowing for steam to push a piston instead of simply just moving atmospheric air, and he received a patent for his design in 1769. James Watt was not the only contributor to his steam engine success, however. Watt's influence in the history of steam engine technology owes much to his business partner, Matthew Boulton, as it does to his ingenuity. The two men formed a partnership in 1775, and Boulton poured a huge amount of money into Watt's innovations. All steam engines before Watt's were restricted to vertical motion only, but his design allowed for the circular motion steam locomotives. In 1801, Richard Trevithick built the world's first steam-powered locomotive, using high-pressure steam. Previous steam engines, like the one James Watt built, used for pumping, required large buildings to house them, and there was no way to realistically power any practical vehicle. Trevithick's high-pressure engine proved to be well-suited for the task, and it solved yet another problem. If anybody wanted to opt for the well-known low-pressure steam engines, they would have to pay a royalty to James Watt, the inventor of the steam engine that we discussed earlier. Trevithick's design bypassed this completely. He faced criticism from James Watt and others about the possible dangers. James Watt had revolutionized everything with his separate condenser for steam engines, basically making him the father of modern steam engines. So Trevithick's ideas were just seen as laughable and dangerous. And when he tested it on December 24th, 1801, his contraption worked flawlessly. Despite objections from Watt and others about the dangers of high-pressure steam, his work ushered a new era of mechanical power and transport. In the decades leading up to the 20th century, there had been a large population of rail enthusiasts who wanted to bring their passions of railroading into their homes. In 1901, Joshua Lionel Cohen realized the potential in this untapped market. Joshua was an entrepreneur from a very young age, and his long fascination with trains continued into adulthood. One day, he spotted a push-along train set in a store window, which gave him an idea for his manufacturing company. Push-along and wind-up train sets had been in use since 1891, but Joshua wanted to make it electric. He envisioned it as nothing more than a display piece to sell to shops for their windows. But when the shops began to sell their displays to customers who inquired, his Electric Express became a real manufactured product. His train empire slowly began to expand after that. Over the next decade, Lionel made more extravagant train sets, incorporating different engines, passenger cars, stations, bridges, and tunnels. By 1909, a large number of scales for these models existed, ranging from pocket-sized to massive garden ones. But Lionel came up with a way to create his own. He came up with Lionel's standard gauge, forcing other companies to adopt it. Other companies would eventually turn into model train companies due to Lionel's insane influence, including Hornby Trains, which would begin to sell OO scale trains in 1925. This new scale, which was slightly bigger than the American HO scale trains, would still run on the same tracks, expanding their market, but would provide enough space to fit motors in the overall smaller British engines. Double O would eventually become the British standard. Now, I really wanted to build a project based on this particular section of the book, which talked about model trains. And while it does mostly talk about Lionel trains, it also kind of is about Hornby trains. And that is what the picture is of, vintage Hornby trains. But how would I be able to get vintage Hornby trains in the United States? Oh. So without further ado, here's the time-lapse of me building the model railroad for this project. I started out with cardboard boxes to make the tunnels, then I put some cardboard pieces around that to build the area of the hill, then I put in plastic bags, butcher paper, tissue paper, really anything that I could think of or find to fill in the gaps. Then I put on a layer of plaster cloth, did that a few times, then of course a layer of regular plaster to further fill in any gaps or holes left by the plaster cloth. Then after that came the gray paint. The gray paint represents stone for the hill. And then after that, of course, the brown paint, which represents dirt on top of the hill. Now, laying the grass, it's not like a grass mat or a sheet. It's actually like a powder that I put over the brown paint, and the brown paint makes the grass stick to the gray paint. And then, of course, I sprayed that with glue. Here's me spreading all of the grass powder across the board to make like just the grassy area for where the tracks are going to go. pasting some trees, and then building up a kit for a diesel fueling facility in the background. And as you can see, there's that butte I mentioned earlier. After the tedious days-long, weeks-long process of building up this hill, painting it up, putting down all the grass, and laying the track, this is what we're left with. Pretty cool, if I do say so myself. There's the history project from last quarter, that butte that I added, incorporated, and transitioned to with the scene. And there is all of the vintage Hornby trains that I own, just like the ones in the picture from the book. I had a lot of fun making this model railroad for this project, and I do hope to expand upon this in the future, whether it be for another project or for my own personal enjoyment. I unfortunately don't have time to talk about all of the different things that I did for my project, aka my journals, like the modern era of rail transportation, but those are all in my journals, and I decided to focus on the steam era and the models that branched out from it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed.